Hey guys, welcome back. Tisha here, back for another chapter reading of The Polygamist Daughter. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit the like button as we jump into it. We will be having 3 of these readings this week. As a reminder, I struggle with the words, I spell them out. You guys, I feel like this book is going to have a lot of words in it that I don't know how to pronounce, but it's okay, because guess what? We still keep going even though we don't know, and then we learn, and we look them up later, and we realize we butchered them. Anyways, I hope you guys are having a great Monday thus far. Let's get into chapter 8. A few weeks later, Gamilio, the brother of sister wives Teresa and Yolanda, arrived at the house to take me to Merida to stay with other relatives for a while. As usual, I didn't protest. I merely gathered my few belongings and put them in a sack. I ran alongside Gamilio to reach the bus station, desperately trying to keep up with his long strides. He didn't slow down for me at all. When we arrived, he got in line to purchase our tickets while I waited in front of a carniceria, Carniceria, a butcher shop across the street. My mouth watered as I watched several patrons exit the carniceria with brown paper bags filled with chicharrones, deep fried pork rinds. A bacon like aroma wafted past me each time. I fantasized that a kind Mexican woman might take pity on a little girl with matted blonde hair and offer to share her snack, but none did. My stomach growled so loudly that I quickly crossed both arms over my tummy to quiet it. I spotted Gamilio waving at me from the bus station and trotted across the street to him. Tengo hambre, Gamilio. I'm hungry. We don't have time to eat, Anna. He grabbed my tiny fist in his large brown hand and pulled me towards the bus marked Merida, Yucatan. Passengers who were already on the bus had lowered every window. I wondered whether their attempts at lessening the stifling heat had been successful, but later discovered they had not. I stumbled alongside Gamilio, trying to keep my feet underneath me. We boarded the bus, and Gamilio handed our tickets to a toothless driver whose long handlebar mustache reminded me of one of the Mexican policemen who had raided Raphael and Antonia's apartment. We're lucky. We made it. I didn't know whether Gamilio was speaking to the driver, to me, or to himself, so I kept silent. We walked down the center of the aisle and looked for an empty seat, but there were none. I was thankful I didn't have to ride on Gamilio's lap. We passed dozens of people, a complete cross-section of Mexican society, men and women, old and young, professionals, farmers, and street vendors, as we made our way to a place where we could stand together. After several stops where people got off, we managed to find 2 vacant seats next to each other. Gamilio pointed out a few landmarks along the way as the bus traveled on the winding highways to Merida. I was staring out the window, lost in my own thoughts, when suddenly Gamilio elbowed me in the ribs and pointed at a highway sign to Guatemala. If you follow that road to Guatemala and then keep going, you'll eventually get to Guatapor, Guatepeor. Get it? You'll be going from mala, bad, to pero, worse. What? Or I don't know if I said that right. Peor, Peor. Okay, it's a joke. Y'all, I'm trying. I gave him a smile. Intense fatigue and hunger kept me from humoring his joke any more than that. What's wrong, little one? He lifted my chin with 2 fingers, so I had to meet his gaze. Well, go ahead. What is it? I'm hungry. I looked down at my filthy flip-flops, ashamed that I've given in to complaining. I felt embarrassed for feeling weak and needy, having to beg for something to eat, but the thin, watery oatmeal I drank for breakfast had long since been digested. Ah, yes, that makes sense. It is well past lunchtime, and you haven't had anything to eat since early this morning. He stood there and glanced around the bus, seeing a street vendor in the throng of the passenger behind us. Gamaliel quickly made his way to the man, bought 2 apples, and returned to where I was sitting, holding on to the vertical metal poles to steady himself as he walked. The bus bounced in and out of potholes along the highway. Here you go, Anna. I could hardly believe my good fortune. I hadn't had an apple or hardly any fruit since leaving the United States months earlier. Now, here's the thing. He's getting an apple, right? And I'm thinking that's all you could get her is an apple. Meanwhile, because of the way that life has been for her, she's grateful for that apple. The truth was, my siblings and I were all malnourished, and we'd been battling diarrhea the entire time we lived in Mexico. We had no choice but to drink the water. Oh. And the parasites attacked our unsuspecting systems with a vengeance. I stared at the delicious fruit, turning it over and over in my hand before taking a first crunchy bite. The sweet juice trickled down my chin, hands, and even my forearms. Something primal took over, and I closed my eyes and gobbled up the fruity goodness like my life depended on it. Moments later, I opened my eyes to see a boy watching me from the opposite side of the bus. His loud voice announced to the entire bus, "Look, she's like a pig with that apple." The word stung, reminding me how Antonia had used the same description of me. They love talking about people and announcing things. Like, why you couldn't just keep it to yourself if she felt like she ate like a pig? I stopped eating momentarily and glanced around to see dozens of faces staring back at me. Many were laughing. Shame washed over me. Shame that I was looked down upon, even among the poorest citizens of a third world country. Shame that my desperate hunger drove me to attack food like a wild animal. But I wanted to dive under my seat and never come out again. But I couldn't move, and there was no place to hide anyway. So I sat there, flooded with embarrassment, the splotchy redness and heat from my humiliation rising from my chest up my neck and cheeks. Still, I continued to eat the apple. I felt compelled to finish it because I didn't know when I'd get another chance to eat it or if I'd ever see another apple again. But every bite I swallowed had to work its way down the lump in my throat. Oh, she went from enjoying like being able to have that to then having the boy pointed out and being embarrassed. You never know what people are going through. And that's just a reminder of that. Chapter 9. Gamaliel and I finally arrived in Merida, Yucatan, where I found out that the other relative I was going to live with was my oldest half-sister, Ramona. I was thrilled. I got more and more excited as we walked from the bus station to her house. Just the thought of living with Ramona was like a soothing balm to my raw, vulnerable heart since I had such a strong maternal attachment to her from all the time she had spent caring for me from the time I was born. In our large families, the oldest girls often were secondary mother figures to their younger siblings. Ramona had taught me my favorite card games and played endless rounds with me. If she ever grew tired of playing the same games with me over and over, I never knew it. And she probably let me win too many times. I remember the day we were going to Olin Mills for a rare family photo session. Ramona entertained me for hours after my mom bathed me, fixed my hair in loose curls, and dressed me up. I was glad Ramona wasn't in Catemaco when her husband Dan got arrested. A primary reason husbands and wives in our family rarely lived together or stayed in the same place for very long. I didn't know it at the time, but many adult family members, including Ramona, were hiding out in Mexico because they had carried out the orders of my father or were involved in other ways. Some were even awaiting prosecution for murder. Wow. But that wasn't the Ramona I knew and loved. Ramona lived in a small efficiency apartment with her 3 daughters and cooked on a small propane-powered camping stove. She had no pan to refry the bean, so she pureed them in a blender. The final texture was smooth, not like the mashed beans I was used to eating in Catemaco and Celeria. She had to add enough liquid from the boiled beans to allow the blender to work, so they came out runnier than what I was used to. I definitely preferred beans that were refried the traditional way, but I didn't voice any complaints. Living with Ramona was nourishment enough to my heart, so the food I ate didn't matter so much. On my second day in Merida, Ramona sent me to the nearby mercado to buy more corn tortillas and beans. Ana, I've wrapped these pesos in a handkerchief. Don't take out the money until you need to pay. I don't want you to lose it. I nodded. I felt confident, having gone to the store dozens of times in Catemaco and Celeria. Go down to the main street until you see the Panderia, the bakery, with a large pink door. Turn left, and the Mercado will be 1 block on the right. I set out for the store, feeling lighthearted and enjoying the abundant sunshine. I walked and walked and walked, but I never saw the pink door Ramona had described. After walking what felt like several miles, I came upon a giant grocery store like the ones I remember seeing in the United States. On the rare occasion when we would go inside to shop, much larger, cleaner, better lit, and more well stocked than a neighborhood mercado. I knew it wasn't the local open air mercado Ramona had described, but I knew I could find the items I needed there. I searched aisle after aisle and eventually found tortillas and beans. On the long walk back home, the big bag of dry beans and tortillas, secured within the cloth sack Ramona had given me, banged repeatedly against my leg as I walked. I had to shift the heavy bag from my right hand to my left and back again. By the time I arrived at the apartment, my legs were aching and my arms felt shaky from the weight of the groceries. She had been worried about me taking so long, but I thought nothing of it. A couple days later, Ramona sent me to the store again. This time, I noticed a closed door painted bright pink, clearly visible to me for the first time. I turned left and spied the mercado that Ramona had described to me initially, mere blocks from our apartment. We didn't stay in that apartment long. After dinner one night, my half-sister Lillian and her husband Mark came to Ramona's apartment with Celia and Hiram, who were living with them. They picked us all up and took us to a beach house they had rented for Ramona in Progreso. I probably didn't say that right. Progreso, a port city also in Yucatan. Lillian and Ramona were much older than I was and were close in age to each other. They were friends, having spent time together growing up as stepsisters. What's the house like? When will we get there? Celia and I chattered with excitement. We kids love being with each other. Lillian turned around in her seat and flashed a smile at the rest of us jammed into the back seat of the station wagon. We have a big surprise for Anna, too. I hope the surprise is her mother, because they've been going through a lot. They've just been getting pushed from house to house to house. Let's see. I stared at her in stunned silence. I couldn't remember anyone ever giving me a surprise before. What is it? You get a bedroom all to yourself. Oh, I was hoping it was her mom. I stared in utter disbelief, unable to speak as I tried to imagine having a room all to myself. Really? I can't. Thank you. Celia looked at me, eyes bright with excitement. Mark pulled into the driveway and parked the station wagon on a large circle made of gravel. He had barely stopped the car before we kids began opening the doors and climbing out. I ran past the younger ones into the house and selected the tiny bedroom on the right as my own. I didn't care if I lived in a closet or under the stairs. Here, I was even farther away from Antonia's critical reprimands, the real benefit. A room to myself was icing on the cake. After I claimed my new room, I ran out onto the back porch. In the moonlight, I could see grassy shrubs, then flat white beaches beyond. The sound of waves crashing on the shore mesmerized me. I decided to sleep with the window open so I could hear those waves each night as I drifted off. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of something wiggling across the wooden planks, a tarantula. Even though it was huge, I wasn't frightened because we used to hold them when we lived in California. During my toddler and kindergarten years, everybody, come out here and see the tarantula I found, I shouted. Mark arrived first, peered down, and smashed the creature under his cowboy boots, then kicked it off the edge of the porch just as the others joined. He leaned over, placed his hands on both knees, and looked each of his kids in the eye. That was a scorpion, Anna. They are poisonous, and their sting makes your skin feel like it's on fire. Stay away from them, and never play with them or pick one up. Wow. Suddenly, I wasn't so keen on having my own room. In fact, I didn't sleep in the room I'd claimed for Anna mere moments before. Not once. Ramona had a bed and a hammock in her room, and I opted for the hammock. I liked the gentle sway, but mostly I liked that it was up off the ground where scorpions couldn't get to me. Ramona had 3 children, born one after the other, stair-stepped down in ages: Heidi, Melissa, and Amanda. Amanda was just a few days old when I came to live with them, and Ramona put me in charge of watching her. I certainly had enough time since I never went to school during the time I lived in Mexico. I spent hours lying in the hammock, rocking back and forth with Amanda on my chest. I felt quite proud of myself that I could get Amanda to sleep. I felt like such a good mama. I adored Ramona's children and would do anything for them. Melissa had a book, The Cat in the Hat Comes Back, which she carried with her everywhere in that house. I read it to her countless times each day, so often that we both memorized it. I tired of it more quickly than Melissa, but she insisted that I read the entire book word for word. If I tried to skip ahead to finish the book faster, she protested and turned back the pages. I found it hard to say no to her giant, pleading eyes. One morning, while we prepared breakfast, I mentioned an idea to Ramona. We should camp out and live on the beach. Wouldn't that be fun? That wouldn't be much fun to me with 3 little girls who get sand in their eyes, ears, mouth, and hair. She pantomimed a shiver at the thought. But if we don't sweep the house for a week, the beach will come to us. Then you could get your wish. The wind blew in the sand faster than we could keep it swept up. Ramona patted my head and then kissed it for good measure. I laughed, although my longing for adventure of living on the beach in the salty air never went away. Mark and Lillian brought their kids along with Celia and Hiram to the beach house almost every weekend. Celia and Hiram and I not only played on the beach, but we also explored the entire area. We loved playing hide and seek around that house. One of my favorite places to hide was in an old weathered wooden boat on a dry dock in the front yard. The boat became a playhouse for us. We cleaned it out as best as we could and played house in it for hours on end. It certainly wasn't seaworthy, but we loved it. Coconut trees dotted the lawn. We had fun shaking the trunks because every now and then a coconut broke loose and fell to the ground. One afternoon, I proudly carried one of the larger coconuts into the kitchen to split open and share with everyone. I used a sharp knife to remove the meat from the shell of the coconut and accidentally pushed the knife all the way through the thick coconut shell deep into my palm. Oh, Lord. I screamed as blood began to ooze where I had cleanly sliced my hand. Ramona, help me. Ramona rushed into the kitchen, holding Amanda when she saw the blood. Ramona handed Amanda to Celia. Anna, you poor thing. Not having any proper medical supplies, she washed the wound and wrapped it with a piece of cloth, cuddling me and speaking in soothing tones the entire time. What a difference that is, because she was treated like she was a nuisance the other place. Here her sister's running to her aid, which is what should happen, trying to make her feel better. I couldn't help but contrast it to the time I cut my leg at Antonia's house, where no one had seemed to care. After Ramona finished wrapping the cut, she brought the back of my hand to her mouth and kissed it. Is that better? I nodded and leaned into her, where I picked up the comforting smell of sweet breast milk on her blouse. You'll have to hold your hand close to keep the cut from reopening. Do you think you could do that? In spite of the throbbing pain, I smiled up at her. Yes. A few weeks later, a scar about the width of the tip of the knife blade that had cut into my hand was all that remained. But I carried with me the caution of working with sharp objects of any kind. Not long after my cut healed, Ramona hollered for me from the back of the house. Anna, come in here, please. I need help getting the girls ready before Mark and Lillian get here. I hurried to the bedroom to help her finish dressing her girls. We all bubbled with excitement that beautiful morning. I was thinking about asking Syl to read The Cat in the Hat Comes Back to Melissa for a change. Ramona said as she smoothed the thin blankets on the girls' bed. Melissa held up the warm book for me to see again. I laughed to myself. I thought of Celia getting stuck reading it instead of me. I made sure that Celia knew that when Melissa said be at in her little toddler way, what she was really saying was read it, which she repeated countless times each day. Hiram and I are going to build a huge sandcastle, I told Ramona. I gestured with my hands to show her the size of our proposed place. We talked about it in the last time he was here. I've been collecting sticks and leaves for the princess and her family who will live there. A little smile tugged at the sides of Ramona's mouth. I imagined she was happy everyone was coming today. All done. Thank you, Anna. I hurried out the front door to wait on the steps that led to the long gravel driveway out to the gate that opened to the street. If Celia didn't arrive soon, I might burst. To my surprise, an orange pickup pulled through the gate. Whoever was driving the vehicle, probably Lorna, my dad's fifth wife, was making her way slowly and cautiously. The truck bounced up and down and back and forth as the driver tried to avoid potholes and larger rocks. Suddenly, before the truck could make it completely up the driveway, the passenger door opened and out jumped my mom. Oh, wow! From the still moving vehicle. She ran toward me, her arms outstretched. I stood rooted to the porch, trembling with the shock of seeing her rushing toward me. Ooh, water for my eyes. I couldn't believe my eyes. No one had told me she was coming. How could they? We had no phone service in the house, and the mail was unreliable and slow. As much as my heart longed for my mom, I certainly hadn't expected she would show up that day after such a long drought of uncertainty of not knowing if I'd ever seen her again. I willed my feet to move, which they finally did. I sprinted toward her, and we enveloped one another in a tight embrace that lasted several minutes. My heart couldn't contain joy, and I began sobbing uncontrollably. Oh, I bet. Because they're not told anything. They're just like ripped apart from their moms, and here she is, finally get to see her. Oh, good for her. Mom, I cried, my voice muffled from my face being pressed up against her. Anna, let me look at you, honey. She held me at arm's length and surveyed me from head to toe. Who cut off all your beautiful hair? Mom's high-pitched voice as she questioned me let me know she was displeased. Several times she ran her fingers through the cropped remains of my strawberry blonde locks. Carmen cut it because she said it was always a tangled mess. The memory of the day Carmen, the sister of a recent convert, had butchered my long hair came flooding back. People disagree with me when I say this sometimes, but I feel like when you cut off these kids' hair like that, and for some of them, it's very traumatizing. And it kind of feels abusive to me, but I'm going to stay in my lane. But I feel like this is probably something that she experienced. We'll see. This time, it was my mom who burst into tears. We both were crying now. Me with my face once again buried in my mom's chest. Mom seemed to mourn the loss of my hair as much as I did. Eventually, she leaned over and whispered in my ear, "I think you look pretty. You always do." I felt like my heart would break open into a million pieces. I simply could not process the shock and joy of having my mother's arms around me again. Peace and security flooded my soul and brought me much needed comfort. "So take me inside. I hear you have your own room." I grabbed her hand in mine and led her toward the house. "Not really, but I do have my own hammock." Mom gave me a puzzled look. "It's a long story." I clung to Mom all weekend, chattering constantly about all the things that had happened to me in Mexico. I asked about my other siblings and the sister wives who still lived in the United States. Mom and I walked down to the beach together on Sunday morning. I showed her all the good places to find the seashells that weren't broken. I told her how much I missed her, and she told me the same. "Are you going to stay here with us?" "I wish I could." Mom leaned over to pick a strand of seaweed off her foot. She tossed it toward the water, but the wind blew it back behind us. She turned toward me. "But I can't. I have to go back to work." "When?" My body tensed up involuntarily. When she didn't answer me right away, I pleaded with her. "Take me with you, Mom, please." I put all of my energy into the most pitiful begging face I could muster. "I can't, honey. Not right now. It's not safe for you in the United States. The reason you were sent here is because your father had a revelation that my children were in danger." I wonder if that's true. I wonder if the kids were really in danger. I don't really feel like they were, because as many children as he has, how do they know whose kids are, his? He believed all of you would be safer in Mexico. But will we be together again soon? I slowly closed my eyes and hung my head as I felt the weight of another separation. A part of me couldn't help but wonder if my dad had sent us to Mexico to protect himself. She lifted my chin. "Anna, I would stay if I could, but I need to go do God's work, and so do you. And right now, God needs you to help Ramona take care of her girls. Can you imagine if she didn't have you here? She would never have time to feed and bathe and diaper them all." "She could manage. Maybe so." Mom looked out at the wide expanse of the ocean. I stared at her face, noticing how drawn and pale her skin looked. If anyone needed to be living on a beach, it was my mom. Suddenly, she smiled, and the space around her eyes crinkled. She turned her face toward me again. "And Anna, if you weren't here, who would read 'The Cat in the Hat Comes Back to Melissa'?" We both laughed, deep laughs that expelled worry and uncertainty, even better than my tears had. Mom grabbed my hand, and we continued collecting seashells along the beach. I held her hand every moment I was picking up those shells. The weekend passed all too quickly, and I was forced to say goodbye to Mom once again. Though I shed many tears after she left, I knew that seeing her, for however brief a time, had soothed my weary little heart. Chapter 10. While in Merida, Ramona and I lived a facade. Residents of the Mexican coast and tourists to the area considered beach houses as dwelling places for the wealthy. Poor people lived on the other side of the highway or much further inland, except for us. I'm sure everyone thought we were rich simply because we were Americans and because of where we lived. What they didn't know was that we only had the bare essentials to keep body, soul, and spirit together. Thankfully, we celebrated what we did have: love and affection. Ever since my mom had first left me in Dallas, and then later when I was living with Raphael and Antonia, I felt alone. Ramona was like a second mom to me. Her presence, care, and unconditional love were a great comfort to me and helped heal some of my wounds. But she wasn't perfect, and some of the traits she exhibited impacted me and stuck with me more than I knew. While living with Ramona, I first experienced a feast or famine mindset about dieting. Like women all over the world, Ramona struggled with getting back into shape after having a baby. She, having a baby, still, she splurged and overate at the most random times. On one occasion, she sent me to the store with 20 pesos. Buy anything that has chocolate in it, Anna. We'll enjoy it together. I didn't question her directive, mainly because I rarely got to enjoy chocolate of any form. I craved the rare treat as much as Ramona, who never splurged on non essentials. I crisscrossed the mercado, priced out items, and kept running the total in my head. When I checked out, everything came to just under 20 pesos. When I got home, I burst through the door, nearly waking Ramona's daughters, who were taking their afternoon naps. Look at all I bought. Ramona and I feasted on those chocolates, relishing every single bite with exaggerated moans, finally bursting out laughing. Ramona told me that she was starting a strict diet the next day. It didn't matter to me what she was planning. I was just glad to have the sweet taste of chocolate to savor now. One morning, I awoke with a sense of anticipation, though I couldn't pinpoint why. I dressed quickly and hurried to join Ramona and the girls in the tiny kitchen. Right before I entered, I caught a whiff of something wonderful, something I hadn't smelled in a long time. I rounded the corner, and there was Ramona, standing beside the kitchen table with Heidi and Melissa on either side of her. Ramona held a plate in her outstretched hands. On it was a stack of 10 pancakes, drizzled in so much homemade syrup that it pooled around the edges of the bottom of the pancake. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Anna. Happy birthday to you. Their unison voices stretch out the final lines of the song to make it last as long as possible. You're 10, shouted Heidi. And Mom made you a pancake cake. I know, I can't believe it. The girls led me to the kitchen table where Ramona cut the stack of pancakes in half one way and then the other. She placed 1/4 of the cake on each of our plates while we enjoyed the sweet goodness. The girls peppered me with questions about what I wanted to do on my birthday. Though I was tempted to say that we didn't have money to celebrate in a big way, I said enthusiastically, after we finish my birthday cake, let's go to the beach. We can look for shells and build a sandcastle and maybe take a nap out there. When we get back home, we can play hide and seek. Won't that be fun? Heidi and Melissa liked my plan, and Ramona worked tirelessly to make it happen. She didn't require any work from me that day except for helping with the girls, which felt more like play to me. That night, as I lay in the hammock, I reflected on turning 10 in Mexico. Far from my mother and my home, I didn't have many possessions, but I had many things to be thankful for, such as the love of my sister and her kids. Ramona had sacrificed and planned ahead to pull off a special birthday celebration despite our poverty. Though I worked hard every day, I didn't live in fear or shame. I didn't worry about some evil person kidnapping me as I trudged from house to house selling painted rocks or cakes. I didn't worry about Raphael's sexual advances and what might lie in my future, such as being married off to one of my dad's followers. I didn't have to put up with Antonia's cruelty. By contrast, Ramona lovingly taught and nurtured me. It had been a good day. I knew this year would bring greater joy. Beat it, Melissa said as she held up a different book, as though she could entice me by suggesting something besides the cat in the hat comes back. I will in a few minutes, but I need to finish this first. Her bottom lip quivered, though I couldn't tell if she felt true sorrow or was working extra hard to manipulate me. Here, I pushed a chair away from the table so she could climb onto it. Want to watch me? I only have one page to go. What are you doing? Heidi asks. I'm copying the teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith. What's that? It's a book by Joseph Smith. He was a prophet just like your grandpa. Joseph Smith led God's chosen people and taught them all about God. Why are you copying it? I stared at the page, half scribbled with my childish writing. Somehow, despite moving so frequently, I had managed to keep with me my notebook pen and the teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith book I had started copying. Ramona's praise for my work encouraged me to keep doing it regularly and studiously. It helps me learn more about God and his kingdom. That answer seemed to satisfy Heidi, and she sat quietly while I continued copying the remainder of the page. But her question kept replaying in my mind. Was I doing this to become a better disciple, or was I just craving the praise that I received? As if on cue, Ramona entered the kitchen and surveyed the scene. Ah, I see you're hard at work copying again. Heidi, you can learn a lot from Aunt Anna. She's a good girl. She's working hard for God. I pressed my lips into a tight smile and tried to block out the conversation while I finished. Finally, I held up my notebook. All done. Let me see. Ramona compared the book to my scribbles. Very nice. Want me to put these up for you? I nodded. Ramona always hid my notebook and pen under her mattress, along with her other Mormon books and my dad's writings. She worried about the landlord stopping in unexpectedly and seeing the religious books and dad's writings. Sadly, when we eventually moved from the beach house, we forgot to take those items. We were miles from Merida, being whisked to a safer place when we realized we had forgotten them. I mourned the loss of those priceless treasures from time to time. I wondered what the next residents thought when they discovered everything tucked away underneath the mattress. Living with Ramona and her girls in a safe and loving environment was a gift to me. In addition to her kind words and encouragement, she made me feel like I was needed and contributing to her family by helping in whatever way I could. I took seriously my responsibilities of shopping and running other errands. Each time I ran errands for her, Ramona paid me a single peso. Though not significant in terms of actual money, her gesture meant a lot to me. Yeah, because it's the first time she's actually having someone give her something instead of just expecting her to do this and do that and take away from her. She recognized and rewarded my hard work. I saved as many of those pesos as I could during the several months I was there. And when Mark told us one weekend that it was time to move again, I realized I had saved up about 70 pesos. As moving day drew closer, Ramona decided to take everyone shopping. We all dressed up and took the bus to the market in the larger town nearby. I took my pesos with me to buy a hammock. I had enjoyed sleeping in one during my beach stay, and I wanted one to call my own. I carefully compared all the colorful hammocks on display in the market, and a purple hammock with white vertical stripes on each end caught my eye. I'd like the purple one, please. I grinned at the vendor. Ramona stepped back and asked the man, ¿Cuánto? How much? 50 pesos, senora. I glanced up at Ramona, thankful that my savings would be enough. Before I could hand him my pesos, Ramona took out her small leather change purse and counted out 50. I stared at her, mouth wide open. But Mona, I want to pay for it, Anna. It's the least I can do for all you've done for me, and especially for my girls, since you moved in with us. She gestured toward the hammock. Even this is not enough for all the help you've been to me. I love this. I may disagree with the fact that a lot of these girls are parentified, these kids, especially the older ones. But I love the fact that her sister is showing her, that I don't take what you've done for granted. The vendor rolled up the hammock and placed it into a cardboard tube for me to carry. I couldn't believe it. Not only did I have the exact hammock I wanted, but I felt like a rich kid with all those pesos still in my pocket. That abundance helped lessen the blow of having to move yet again. Not too long after our shopping excursion, Hiram was dropped off at the beach house with his belongings. Lorna showed up again in her orange pickup truck with a camper shell on the back of it. Her children rode up front with her, which meant my brother and I rode in the camper. Most of the sister wives gave preferential treatment to their own children, understandably so. Lorna was no exception. We traveled like that all the way from Merida, Yucatan to Houston, Texas, a 3-day journey. We couldn't open any windows in our enclosure, and the lack of fresh air made it difficult to breathe in the stifling heat. I found it impossible to get comfortable sitting or lying or on the uneven bed of the truck. There were a few boxes in the back, along with some large garbage bags full with everyone's belongings. I wish 1,000 times that I had thought to grab bring a pillow or two to bring along. We leaned up against the garbage bags in an effort to get comfortable. Several hours into the trip, one of Lorna's kids slid open the tiny glass window between the cab of the pickup and the camper. We're going to stop for a potty break. Make sure Hiram is awake. A few minutes later, Lorna pulled up to the side of the highway and we all got out. She and Natasha, one of Lorna's daughters, who was close to my age, held up ratty towels to give me a little privacy while I peed. Still, I felt extremely exposed as cars sped by. I've peed on the road before, so I get it. A few drivers honked their horns at us, which made me jump. We took turns holding the towels up for each other on the side of the road as one by one we all relieved ourselves. After everyone finished, Lorna asked, "Is anybody hungry?" A chorus of yeses was loud and unanimous. "Follow me." She carefully held apart sections of barbed wire for us to climb through, and we made our way to the farm at the side of the highway. We crossed several rows of plants before she knelt down and picked up a watermelon. We all sat in a circle around her as she took out a pocket knife and began cutting it into pieces to pass the massive fruit. After breaking open the watermelon, she carved off the chunks of the red fruit and handed the pieces to us. Half starved, we attacked our juicy treat and spit seeds at one another. The juice trickled down my arms and dripped off my elbows into the dirt. I was grateful when I got to wash my sticky hands and arms as at the next gas station restroom because so much dirt clung to the sticky residue from the watermelon juice. The pit stops to forage for fruit quickly became my favorite part of the long journey. So she just going to random yards and farms and stuff and basically stealing stuff to feed the kids. At night, Lorna pulled off onto a dirt road and we simply slept wherever we were. Thankfully, Lorna opened the back of the camper. Though we didn't get a breeze, we did get to breathe fresh air for a change. On the third day, Natasha opened the sliding windows and said, "We're coming to the U.S. border checkpoint. Mama's going to pull over and explain to us what to do." Lorna stopped the orange pickup near a small park and she opened the back of the camper. "Okay, kids, time to get out." Hiram and I hopped out quickly. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to drive across the border with my kids because I have their papers. I'll park the truck on the U.S. side and leave my children with it. Then I'll walk back and get 2 of you and we'll cross the border together." "But we don't have any papers." I regurgitated the words as soon as they left my mouth. I knew better than to question one of the sister wives. "I'll use my kids' papers for you. That's why we have to go in 2 groups. And we'll have a different border agent when we walk across than when I drive across." I marveled at the brilliance and simplicity of the plan. "If you do as I ask and stay put, I'll buy you ice cream after we get across the border." Hiram and I sat on the park bench and watched the orange truck disappear into the Mexican traffic. We waited patiently for Lorna to return. I enjoyed sitting outdoors instead of lying down in a closed camper, and I eagerly anticipated eating ice cream. "Lorna, eventually showed up, looking every bit like a tourist just out to see Mexico for the day. Come on, kids, let's go back to America. We crossed the border without incident, and soon we were in line at the McDonald's in Brownsville, Texas. Lorna ordered 3 chocolate shakes and gave one to Hiram and me to split between us. The rich chocolate tastes incredible, especially after months of tortillas and smashed baked beans. We still had several hours to go before we reached Houston, but after the chocolate shake, the driver didn't seem as hot or difficult. I smiled at Hiram, who still had a tiny brown mustache from trying to get the last couple of drops out of the cup we shared. Lorna took us to Mark and Lillian's house in Houston, where I was reunited with Celia. We hugged and talked a mile a minute, catching up after months apart. We only spent a night there. The next morning, Mark and Lillian put Celia, Hiram, and me on the plane to Denver, my first plane ride ever. Hiram and I were buckled in our seats when one of the stewardess came over to check on us. Y'all doing okay? Yes, ma'am. When will the airplane take off? I asked. She laughed in a sweet way at my question. The airplane took off about 5 minutes ago, honey. We're already flying. I stared at her in shock. The same stewardess later brought us each a pair of airplane wings to pin on our shirts for being first-time travelers. We landed. Mom was there to meet us at the gate. I hugged her so hard, I didn't want to ever let go. And that is where we're finished our reading for today. Go ahead and do me a favor, hit the like button. Share this video if you want to. We're on the way to 5,000. Yes, I know it's a big number, but I plan on getting there sooner than later. Let me know what you thought of this reading. Until next time.